Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and I just got back from the new film Ender's Game. When an alien race called the Formics attacks Earth in 2086, their attack is stopped by this guy, Mazer Rackham, but tens of millions of people die, and the Earth is trying to prepare itself in case of another attack. They're using young teens, slowly training them, viewing them throughout their schooling, and then if they're good enough, they send them to battle school. And Ender Wiggin, is good enough that they want to send him to battle school, and they feel he's one of the best of his generation. And so they send him there. He is particularly loved by General Griff, played by Harrison Ford, who thinks he's going to be the one that's going to save humanity from being destroyed by the Formics, who they think will come back and destroy all of humanity. And they think this will keep them from being destroyed by the Formics if he is a good enough of a leader to come up with a plan, just like Mazer Rackham did in 2086. It's important to note that I never read the book Ender's Game. I was often told I should, and I just didn't. A lot of the time when I'd be watching this movie and they'd be referring to stuff that I hadn't been shown in the movie, I would really be confused. Like when Ender gets this implant taken out that the government can see through his eyes, and he's really upset about it. And I'm like, well, wait, why do they do that? Is that a thing that they do for people? I don't understand. And there's just a lot of instances like that. This film starts off with the battle with these aliens who come, and Mazer Rackham destroys them, and then we just cut to Ender. And that kind of hurt my enjoyment of the film, because there are huge portions throughout it where I just was really lost. I was like, wait, so it's a big deal he's a third kid? Wait, is that a thing or something? You can't have more than 2 kids? And you have to pay a fee or something? Why is this way? Why is that way? Why, I just didn't get anything because it just wasn't properly explained to me. And I kept thinking of another movie that had a future world where it had all sorts of rules and circumstances and context that I needed to know to understand it, and that was Pacific Rim. And Pacific Rim starts off very well with a really great little documentary thing at the beginning to kind of tell you what the whole thing with Jaegers and the kaiju is, so I know the context of where I am at that point in the story of the Jaegers and the kaiju coming and destroying people on Earth and things like that. I know the context of the story and where we are in the history of this universe. In Ender's Game, I know a bunch of crap happened a long time ago with these aliens, and then there's Ender. And there's no way to really get me as an audience member to understand what has been going on in the context of that world. It doesn't care about context. The director of this film, Gavin Hood, who is also notorious for directing the film X-Men Origins Wolverine, doesn't really care that much about context. He just seems to care about almost mostly a companion piece to a novel. Anytime I've seen a bad movie, I always feel like I'm seeing a cut down version of a better movie, and that maybe a longer cut would have all the nuanced character development and cool dialogue and all the background information that would have made it clearer. And that longer cut is a book. And so this is really just a companion piece. This isn't really a movie. But it's odd because this is made to start a franchise. This was made to be a major motion picture, a Hollywood film with hundreds of millions of dollars. And it's not explaining itself in an artistic way that's like trying to say something about Ender or this world or the context of the story or anything. It's just a badly set up story. Theory-wise, it's against what it's trying to do financially and what the point of making this movie was, to make a fantastic science fiction film that lots of people would see, and hopefully there'd be tons of sequels. I mean, I don't think Summit, who also did things like Twilight, and Lionsgate, who are now the same studio, but who did things like Hunger Games, would have bought the rights to a book like this if they hadn't intended to do something like that. And I know that's the intention. That's the point of this movie, and this director doesn't seem to be game for it, but he also doesn't really seem to know exactly what he's doing. He seems a little confused. Some relationships are explained, some aren't. Ender's relationship with his sister Valentine is incredibly underdeveloped, and I don't really understand when he goes on and on about how his emails are being blocked. He goes on and on about his relationship with his sister, who you never understand their relationship. Why is that important to him? I'm never told that as an audience member. It's just like I'm expected to know these things. But that's the director's job. He wrote the screenplay as well. That's the point of what he's supposed to do, is explain it to me. He's supposed to show me and explain to me why this is important. And he never does. He just expects me to know because I was supposedly supposed to read this book before seeing this movie. And that's just a very lazy job as a director. And it does also seem like they're kind of doing a Harry Potter thing. Even though this was written first, I think it kind of suffers from the fact that this director doesn't seem to know how to make this any different than a normal young adult movie. And, you know, their little space game seems a little too much like Quidditch. This feels just like a studio going like, oh yeah, we can make another Harry Potter, rather than someone going like, you know what, I want to make a really cool Ender's Game movie. A lot of his direction is like a very safe, boring studio director. None of the cinematography is that interesting. It's very like kind of bland and banal, just normal, like what you're supposed to do. None of the special effects are that awe-inspiring. They don't really let you get into any of the battle sequences that well. None of the action sequences are done with any sort of a flair or anything. It just seems like he does the minimum amount and expects you to kind of get into it through that. Without any of these relationships, this film feels very cold and confused. Even the kid who plays Ender, Aja Butterfield, he doesn't seem to know what he's doing in the movie. You know, the only one I think Harrison Ford actually worked pretty well, which I think is a surprise because I don't normally like Harrison Ford currently, but I thought his old man shtick actually worked with Ender's Game. It's just a confused, big budget blockbuster. For a long time I've heard about an Ender's Game movie happening and it never seemed to come together, and then finally it's here. After I left, I kind of thought about like, man, I can't wait for 2033 when the new version of Ender's Game comes out and blows this out of the water. This hails more to old studio thinking about how you can make a big blockbuster tentpole movie. Do you want to make the Chronicles of Narnia, or do you want to make Harry Potter? And there's a difference, and the reason Harry Potter was so good is because it had a uniqueness about it. It had a feel about it. There's a feeling about the Harry Potter movies that the Golden Compass and Narnia could never do. And there's a feeling about the Lord of the Rings movies and any of those franchises. There's a distinct feeling, and there's a need for you as an audience member because you connected to those people. I have no connection to Ender, and this film didn't even try to do that. There's no sequence where I understand who Valentine is. There's no sequence where I understand this world. Most of what I understood about this world is from information I read on the internet previous to seeing this movie. That is not how you make films. This film is riding too much on the pre-existing book and isn't as concerned with being a standalone awesome movie. And that's the major problem with it. It really relies on the fact that the book exists. So much so, I don't think you could really get into this if you haven't read the book, because I really had a hard time understanding like what the big deal was with this story while watching the movie. It seemed like a story that if someone really creative and someone really invested in the story could direct and make, it probably would be really awesome. But Gavin Hood isn't that person, and he really showed it with his direction here. It's not a horrible, horrendous movie. It's just a very, very flawed movie that doesn't really work, and which is unfortunate because I think this could be something at some point. But the way they did it this time, it certainly won't be. So if you have seen Ender's Game and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.